originally broke, even my very, very liberal paralegal instructor, thought that this right was a load of BS. Now, before we talk about Richie Incognito, Jonathan Martin, phone calls with certain words getting tossed around, before we talk about these tweets, before we talk about the incident, which, by the way, I obviously have gotten to much, much later in my posting schedule, I want to go ahead and say this. It feels to me like we're entering a period of our existence when a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people who hoaxed others or told a lie about somebody or levied false accusations against somebody or a people or persons, it seems to me like we are now in a period where people are starting to want to fess up and tell the truth. A great example of this would be the girl in the Duke lacrosse case, whose name I will not mention because it does not deserve to be mentioned, has came out and said that that right there was obviously a load of BS. Even though a court of law determined that right there to be a load of BS. And of course, if you knew the details of the Duke lacrosse scandal, then you would know it was BS from the start. But still, though, there are people out there saying that lawsuits should be filed. So let us go ahead and talk about the BS of the Jonathan Martin, Richie Incognito situation. Let me roll this a little bit so that way you guys can get an idea of what's been going on the past week.
And others who couldn't wait to bash the big bad white dude. Big Richie Incognito, kind of crazy, maybe some roids, I don't know. Kind of nuts. But they couldn't wait to do it, man. It's the same old, same old. We don't want to be right. We just want to be first. We don't want to.
I don't believe you should treat your friends that he said I was a mentor. You shouldn't treat your friends like that. You shouldn't treat your mentees like that. You shouldn't treat your youngins like that. But we all know there is a rite of passage in the way that you are treated in this league because somebody treated us like that.
Okay, so many years ago, eons ago, whatever you might want to say, there was a football player by the name of Richie Incognito. He was an offensive lineman, known to be a bit of a loose cannon, and he had a teammate by the name of Jonathan Martin, who I want to say was in his second total season in the NFL at the time. People with much, much more up-to-date facts. You guys can fact-check me in the comment section. This incident went widespread because of a voicemail of which I had to cut a piece of it out because of a certain word you can't say here online as a white man. Let me just remind you.
I saw you on Twitter. You've been training 10 weeks. I want to come in your fucking mouth. I'm going to slap your fucking mouth. I'm going to slap your real mother across the face. Fuck you. You're still a rookie. I'll kill you.
Went viral. Completely viral, and it was a story for pretty much the entire NFL season. Now, Richie Incognito is not a saint. I'm not here to defend Richie Incognito. I'm here to tell you guys right now that the situation was just BS to begin with. Also, to go on top of that, let's just go ahead and say this. If you're going to be in the NFL, if you're going to be in a locker room, you might want to learn to, I don't know, grow a pair. You might want to learn that, yeah, people are going to say some things to you, some things about you, even though they may be your friends on the team. You might want to go ahead and get used to that. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time somebody who outranked me when I was in the Marine Corps chewed me out, I probably would not be here on YouTube because I'd probably be a multimillionaire not needing to post on this platform. But still, though, the point is this here. If you're going to play professional sports, you better go ahead and get used to the baggage, and you better go ahead and get used to talking to other people and being talked down to by other people and receiving some form of criticism, even if said criticism might be going a little bit too far. All I got to say is that Richie Incognito has a reputation for being a bit of a loose cannon. But it obviously didn't hurt him too much because he went on to play for the Buffalo Bills and then he eventually went on to play for the Raiders. So when Richie Incognito sees that Jonathan Martin, a guy who for the most part got him in trouble with the media because of certain words that were said, he finds out that this guy admits that it was a load of BS. It doesn't surprise me that Richie Incognito decided to go off with tweets basically saying it was a load of BS. Don't worry, they'll all be linked in the description box. You guys know me. I don't read the stuff verbatim. However, what I found very interesting was the fact that Richie Incognito is pointing out Adam Schefter's involvement in the story and Mike Floria's involvement in the story. Now, let me go ahead and say this right quick about Adam Schefter and, of course, Mike Floria. Adam Schefter did not exactly endear himself to a certain fan base back in 2019, 2021, that time frame right around the NFL draft. Because if you guys remember correctly, if you're a Packers fan, you may remember that Adam Schefter's reputation got destroyed during that draft because he reported for like 2 straight years that Aaron Rodgers was about to be traded. He was disgruntled. He's gone. The Packers are trying to move him. They're trying to get rid of him. The Denver Broncos are going to pick him up. It was 2021 and 2022. Neither time did it turn out to be true. As a matter of fact, Rodgers himself would eventually tell Adam Schefter to lose his number. Now, Schefter has kind of gained back some of his credibility, but still at the same time, if it comes from Adam Schefter, you have to take it with a grain of salt, which is exactly what happened when this story initially broke. Mike Florio, on the other hand, if you know who he is, then chances are you probably know, speaking of Aaron Rodgers, he's obsessed with him, you probably know that Mike Florio is a bullshit merchant, very, very much a liberal, and he hates his own audience that he talks to every day. The fact of the matter is that these people's credibilities began to die roughly right around the time of the Richie Incognito situation with Jonathan Martin. And the reason why I say they started to die at that point in time is because this right here is when the NFL began to first start actually feminizing. You see, this story got to the media, and the media ran with it, called Richie Incognito a racist, called him insane, called him crazy. You even had people like Nick Wright, Nick Wrong, who's never right about anything, saying crap like this not too long ago.
Incognito got thrown out of Nebraska, essentially. He left after being suspended indefinitely, then got thrown out of Oregon. And we know who he is. We know he uses racial slurs against teammates, against trainers, against opponents. We know that he has had real bouts with what I would consider psychiatric issues and what he has considered psychiatric issues.
Yes.
Up to and including in the last year. I mean, here's the latest thing on his rap sheet. Arrested for threatening to shoot employees at a funeral home while making arrangements for his father. He had 2 handguns, 3 rifles, and a suppressor. That's a silencer. Employees said Incognito wanted to, quote, cut his father's head off for research purposes and then walk through the funeral home punching caskets and throwing things. There's edge guys. And there's me.
Of course, the full facts from those situations and those cases had not been reported at the time, but as you guys can obviously see, the mainstream media and sports media are not that different. They really truly are not nowadays, and it's part of the reason why it is that people are, in fact, frustrated with the media as a whole. Never mind what a teammate says about Incognito. Never mind what the guy next to him says will actually happen here. Never mind that at all. We don't give that person credence because the media needs its next big story. So, speaking of that story, so what was it? Well, it was a voicemail that I mentioned earlier, and it led to a firestorm of reporters like Florio and Schefter going out of their way to completely and totally defame Richie Incognito, which Incognito, if he had wanted to, could have sued these people for defamation because Incognito found himself getting attacked by the media for the better part of 6 or 7 years. Richie Incognito is a loose cannon, as Dan Dankich explained in his bit, which we'll get to here in a second. He is a loose cannon. He always has been a loose cannon, but this type of talk in the locker room is, quite frankly, something you need to get used to. Now, I want to talk very, very briefly about Martin before we get to Dankich, because the truth about Jonathan Martin is this here. Jonathan Martin was later on determined to have had mental issues. He couldn't take it. He couldn't hack it in the NFL. That was the issue. Now, I want to say this really quick before we go any further, because somebody's probably going to come in here and they're probably going to say, well, if he wasn't meant to be in the NFL, he never would have gotten drafted. He couldn't take it. Bear with me for a second. There's a phrase that we had when I went through the law enforcement academy. And the phrase was, some people are meant to be the police and some people are meant to call the police. However, there's a third category altogether, which is some people are meant to graduate the academy. Some people are meant to get hired, yet those same people who were meant to do that there are not meant to do it long term. They're basically short timers. Something about the job, something about the gig would either A, be unappealing to said individual and they would eventually leave, or they would not become successful, or they may even get fired, or worse yet, somebody could get hurt as a result of this. Jonathan Martin strikes me as the kind of guy that went into the NFL with the belief that he could make it long term, but he had no idea of what the hell he was getting into, and he may have even been coddled somewhat growing up. I mean, seriously, what Richie Incognito said on that voicemail is nothing compared to the things that I have received and have been said to me by people who outrank me and even people with the same rank as me or growing up as a child. The fact of the matter is, if you're going to be in the NFL, it's basically get tough or die. You need to grow a pair, and Jonathan Martin, quite frankly, just did not have it. However, Incognito being concerned about the let's just say conspiracy, that right there is a different topic altogether, which I will go ahead and briefly talk about now. So the belief is that Jonathan Martin's mother because Jonathan Martin was lost on how to get out of his contract, because there was a bonus in his contract, which he had to play a certain amount of games, a certain amount of time to unlock that bonus, or else if he quit, he was going to owe that money back. Jonathan Martin's mother apparently got involved and told him to cry mental health disorder, so that way he could get some sympathy in the media and not be forced to pay back that money, so that way he could use it as an excuse to eventually leave. I got mental problems. I got stress. I got issues. I need to get out of here. This guy, who, by the way, Richie Incognito, is smaller than Jonathan Martin, bullied me and called me a half N-word. He gave me the greatest opportunity in the world to not have to pay back that money. That right there is the conspiracy here. But for the time being, without any proof, I'll just simply say that I think Jonathan Martin was just a great big giant pussy and could not handle being in the NFL. Hey, seriously, Incognito shared all those photos of him and Jonathan Martin getting drunk together and partying together at the bar. Obviously, these two got along at some point in time. But still, at the same time, given Incognito's nature, him being a loose cannon, which, by the way, I'm not defending, it doesn't surprise me that the truth is finally starting to come out. Now, let's get to Dankage.
You got to understand, Schefter is the poster child for a little runty guy that no one paid attention to, went to law school, found his way on ESPN, found a niche, and then as he got more and more popular, he became a guy in his own mind. You'll never hear an apology from Schefter. Never. Why? A couple reasons. One, it's not within him. He's so arrogant. The little ones usually are. And, of course, that would open him up to a lawsuit by admitting that he was wrong.
He's correct. Go back to the Aaron Rodgers situation. It was exposed on Dan Patrick's show that there was never a trade in place and that he was operating on bits and pieces of articles that had been put out over the previous 3 or 4 years by the Green Bay Press Gazette and the ESPN Milwaukee and all those networks there, which, by the way, have gone full-blown left-wing. He never apologized about that situation. He didn't come out and say he got it wrong. That's one of the biggest reasons why it is people started trusting Ian Rappaport a lot more than people were just had more respect for Ian Rappaport over Adam Schefter. And, of course, Ian Rappaport was a regular on the Pat McAfee show. But, of course, Pat McAfee eventually signed with ESPN. So now we cannot have Ian Rappaport anymore, and we're stuck with Adam Schefter. The fact of the matter is that Adam Schefter has never really and truly been fully credible. And as I may have already said in this video, anything that Adam Schefter says has got to be taken with a grain of salt. Florio, I'm not even going to entertain in this video because if you know who Mike Florio is, chances are you already know he's a bullshit merchant, not worth covering. But let's continue.
No one's painting Incognito out to be a saint, by the way, so just stop it, stupid. Nobody's doing that at all. But wrong is wrong and right is right. And most of us knew at the time this didn't smell right. It just didn't smell right. And turns out it didn't. But it smelled right to a dude like Schefter and others who couldn't wait to bash the big bad white dude. Big Richie Incognito, kind of crazy, maybe some roids, I don't know. Kind of nuts. But they couldn't wait to do it, man. It's the same old.
The whole idea was to garner additional ratings and, of course, to go on top of that, preach a race narrative that white people were racist, especially ones like Incognito. The idea was obviously to damage him, but like I said before, obviously a couple of the NFL teams did not buy into that, and they were willing to give him a chance. And Incognito, for the most part, has still had I personally believe he had a pretty good career because he was actually able to last on these teams, but still at the same time, though, if anybody had a case to be upset at this moment in time, it's definitely Richie Incognito. And like I said, I'm not saying this to defend Richie Incognito. We all know he's a loose cannon. We all know he's crazy as hell, but still at the same time, though, the man, for the most part, was defamed. Bullygate was always a load of BS. However, now that the mainstream media once again got exposed for a hoax, a lot like the North Carolina media got exposed and certain politicians back in 2006, 2008 over the Duke lacrosse scandal. Now we have the sports media going out of their way to rationalize everything that happened, which brings us to Ryan Clark. Let's watch this.
Of Jonathan Martin's mental health struggles, Jonathan Martin's immaturity, right? Jonathan Martin allowing his mother to use the word bullying and not having enough of whatever it was to stand up and say, no, I don't believe that's what it is. Now, what upsets me about Jonathan Martin is he's now trying to regain his life because people will forever look at him like the 330-pound man that got bullied. right? And he doesn't want that anymore. He feels like he's strong enough now. But you let Richie Incognito not only be thought of as a bully, and I never looked at it that way, right? The first thing I thought was, at some point, listen, ass whippings happen, but you can't be scared to take a loss.
Holy shit, we actually agree. We actually agree. You let your mama ruin your reputation and your life. Ryan Clark actually got that correct. And ass whoopings to be had. Jonathan Martin had a lot of size on Richie. I think that Jonathan Martin just wasn't that confrontational of a person. Maybe he's a gentle giant. He trusted his mama, who had an axe to grind and was very, very cheap, very, very nefarious. Maybe that's what happened here. Maybe that's what seriously happened here. And maybe Jonathan Martin is telling the truth because maybe his mama, maybe she might have a little bit too much. Maybe he's trying to clear his image. But then again, though, there are other players who have gone away from the truth in the past, like, say, in the case of Michael Orr. But so far, I actually got to give Ryan Clark some credit. But let's keep watching.
If it's that bad and you feel that way, then you got to stand up and show you can't treat me like this forever. That was my thought, right? I have since tried to evolve from a mental health and emotional perspective to say some people just can't do that. And within the locker room, whether it's coaches or players, I got to know how to deal with Channing if I'm a leader. I got to know how to deal with Fred if I'm a leader. Obviously, Richie Incognito wasn't evolved enough for that. His father, though, Gus Martin, in the story that they wrote, he played
now, before we get back to that voicemail, I just wanted to say, so far, so good out of Ryan Clark. Jonathan Martin should have done that. Jonathan Martin should have said, look, you can't do this to me no more. Should have done it in a healthy environment. The two of you people step outside, or you tell them point blank to your face. I mean, look, Richie Incognito, like I said, is a loose cannon, but Richie Incognito is not bigger than Jonathan Martin. They're a little bit smaller. I mean, I don't think Richie Incognito would get to an actual fist fight with Jonathan Martin. I think he was negging him just to be negging him, because sometimes you got to push people, and sometimes you just want to get under somebody's skin to see exactly how far they'll go or how they'll respond. I think that there's what the hell really truly happened with Richie Incognito, because we haven't really had too many on-field incidents. There's been a couple, but with him, not that many. The truth be told is Richie Incognito is, for the most part, a guy who's a bit of a bully, yes, but he's one of those bullies that can be put in his place very, very easily, which oftentimes is what most bullies are. If you don't stand up to them, they'll keep doing it, but when you stand up to them, they'll leave you alone. If Jonathan Martin had simply stood up for himself here, then chances are this entire situation probably would not have happened, and Jonathan Martin wouldn't look like a great big giant mama's boy at this moment in time. But about that voicemail.
I saw you on Twitter. You've been training 10 weeks. I'll your mouth. I'm going to slap your mouth. I'm going to slap your real mother across the face. He laughed. You're still a rookie. I'll kill you. Now, when you read it, it doesn't give you tone, yes. Right? It doesn't give you intent, right? And so for me, I know no white man ever walking the face of the earth can think it's cool to joke with me like that, use the word like that, use the word at all without us having an issue. For Jonathan Martin, that wasn't a problem. And so now, though, when you say these things, and when I read the Ted Wells report, I'm like, not only is he a bully, he's an effing racist. And that's hard to kick. And that man lost a year for that. Now, I don't believe that this behavior should take place. I don't believe you should treat your friends that he said I was a mentor. You shouldn't treat your friends like that. You shouldn't treat your mentees like that. You shouldn't treat your youngins like that. But we all know there is a rite of passage in the way that you are treated in this league because somebody treated us like that.
Not bad, RC. Not bad. Now, I would never say anything racist like that, not within the bounds of motivating somebody. But I can see in the comical sense how you could, because we all know about ethnic comedy. But I think RC is actually correct, the rite of passage. And that rite of passage was obviously not a rite of passage that Jonathan Martin could have handled, which is what the hell really happened in this case. Jonathan Martin was never cut out for the NFL. That's the truth. He was never cut out to do it long term. even if he had stayed with the Dolphins, even if he had not left the NFL, he probably would not have lasted long. Incognito obviously had the better mindset to survive in the league, hence his career, hence the amount of time he played versus Martin. The fact of the matter is Jonathan Martin looks very, very weak, and he even looks weaker now that he's come out with this. But can Jonathan Martin repair his reputation? Maybe. Maybe someday. Maybe him and Incognito could have a podcast together and talk about crap. I mean, Shannon Sharp did have Bill Romanowski on his show at one point in time, and Bill Romanowski actually tried to break Shannon Sharp's arm. But still, though, the point is this right here. This entire situation was BS. So who the hell should we really and truly be pointing the fingers at? Well, it goes back to Schefter, it goes back to ESPN, and it goes back to Mike Florio. And in a lot of ways, this right here was probably the start of when our sports media decided to start going full-blown 100% complete total leftoid. And that, my friends, is why it is Bullygate was just a load of crap, and it was actually the thing that kind of shifted the sports media in this direction. But then again, though, there were also other incidents, but I think this right here is probably one of the most prominent. You guys tell me what you think in the comment section. We'd love to hear what you guys have got to say. There's going to be a second video out today talking about Stephen A. Smith potentially running for president. So, yeah, we'll be hitting sports twice. Make sure you guys please hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, sign off in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.